Hello and welcome back to the Customer Success Festival. I hope you found a presentation that answers your burning questions. If not, don't forget to join our Circle community where you can network with hundreds of other customer success professionals. If you prefer networking face-to-face, then you can join our virtual networking session on each day of the festival. Check out the schedule for more details. And now for our next speaker. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to watch you guys, watching the rest of the presentations throughout the day, getting your questions answered and joining all the presenters. So we've got an amazing panel just coming up. As you can see, our presenters are very keen to get started. So the panel is leveraging metrics to position partnership between sales and customer success. So we've got our speakers here. So let's start with Santosh, Rupal, Michelle, Mansi,
Hey Rupal,
and
Jama.
Hey everyone.
Thanks for joining us. So we have our moderator here, Joseph, who's from Monday.com. He's just having a couple of technical difficulties, but while he's doing that, we'll go around and do short introductions from everyone. So Santosh, let's start with you.
I can go first. Gemma, do you want me to go first?
Yeah, Rupal, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. My name is Rupal Nishar. I'm the AVP of Customer Success at a company called Natomi. We are a AI-based solution, AI-based software, SaaS organization. We're a global company, and I'm super excited to be part of this panel here too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Mansi, should we go next?
Sure. Mansi Suresh. I head up the enterprise account management team for North America here at Monday.com. We run a best-in-class operating system and project management solution and work with some of the largest companies in the world.
Awesome. And Santosh,
I can go next. This is Santosh. I lead our customer success team in MuleSoft for our retail and consumer goods vertical. We are the leading API and integration platform. In the marketplace, we are close to 1.2 billion revenue, and we are growing at 45%. Power some of the largest Fortune 100 customers in their transformation journey. I lead a set of CSMs who lead our customers in their success for specifically retail and consumer goods domains.
Awesome. And we've got Joseph here as well.
Oh, hi everyone. This is Joseph. I'm actually Mansi's counterpart at Monday.com. So I help lead up our customer success team here in the US based out of our New York office.
Awesome. And we do have a fifth panelist. We have Michelle Weidman from Owner. So she is currently in Mexico. How exciting. But I believe it must be messing with her signal there. So once she's able to join us again, we will do the introductions. But Joseph, can you introduce us to the topic today?
Yes, absolutely. So today, very excited to bring to you guys the topic of driving collaboration between sales and CS via metrics. So we've got a great panel today of CS leaders, as well as Mansi, who has led in CS, but actually leads a sales partner, a cross-functional partner now, or partner team now. So it'll be really interesting discussion to see how the metrics are set up on the CS side, how sales will interact with that, and ultimately how we can all drive towards higher performing teams. There's going to be a lot of discussion around well, we're all driving towards high revenue at the end of the day, but what we want to do today is really hone in on the specific behaviors that these metrics will foster and encourage, so we can get more into the tactical execution of just getting better overall. So I actually want to start with a broader topic and just go around the panel and ask. We'll start with Rupal. But what specifically are some of the high-level benefits that you've gained from driving collaboration between sales and CS?
I think ultimately we're all part of the same team is what I believe. I think the net goals are primarily the same. For me personally, I've seen that having sales and customer success aligned ultimately translates into a customer having a good experience, right? You're unified in making sure that the customer is getting value out of the product. You're actually selling to the right customer, and ultimately that you can grow and expand that relationship. So I think the foundation or the value that we get is that deep-rooted relationship building and the right infrastructure to grow and scale the customer. So I think setting the building blocks in place with sales and customer success is critical, both from a relationship perspective and ultimately will have an impact to the bottom line, or the NRR, the metric that we all care about.
Amazing. Yeah, in our initial discussion, we covered topics like individual team quotas. We looked at the customer journey mapping when we were looking at metrics. We also looked at pre and post sales activities. We'll go deeper into these discussions, but just want to also understand from Santosh, your perspective, how has driving collaboration between sales and CS impacted your organization?
Yeah. So I think when we started, I think we had two key philosophies which we aligned, right? So first being customer success is everyone's responsibility, right? So CS leads, but everybody is invested in that. And then another line which intersects with that is everyone sells, right? Like in a tech organization, everybody sells, right? So it's that intersection of that where you define the sales and CS philosophy, because you are invested in both, right? CS is invested in growing ACV, and sales is also invested in making sure the customers are maintaining a healthy path, because you can grow them, right? And in our case, what has happened is it is very explicit, because we are a quota carrying CS organization, right? So our individuals do carry quota, and what it has done to us is, we are a $1.2 billion organization growing at 44%, but out of that, about 65% of the revenue comes from the existing customer base, right? And that because of that close CS and sales alignment, that we are able to do.
Did we lose Santosh?
I think he was actually going into the alignment between longer term sales and partnerships potentially between post-sale customer success teams and post-initial sales teams like the ones that you manage, Monty. So I'm actually curious to hear from your perspective as a sales manager today, what are some of the main benefits that sales and CS gain from collaborating with one another?
Yeah, so as we know, account management is different from net new sales in the fact that we don't get to sell and then pass on the contract, right? We now have ownership of this. Whatever promises we may have made, whatever dreams we may have set up, these are now things that we actually have to be accountable for. So at the end of the day, it is keeping the customer as that North Star and creating that trust relationship. And for us to be able to do that trust relationship, it's about being able to have a holistic conversation that is relevant and being able to actually have these organic conversations that then will lead to sales. If the customer feels like every time they're talking to the account manager, it's going to end up in an invoice, you're not going to be getting that level of trust, right? And the account managers rely very heavily on their counterparts in customer success to make sure that they are involved and understand what the use case is that the customer is using us for, so that they can drive towards those value metrics as defined by the customer and then close that loop around, right? So for me and the orgs that I run, it's imperative to have that partnership because it creates that trust relationship, which then takes us from selling to more about need-based and value-based conversations that evolve and organically move towards, additional investment.
Yes. I mean, speaking directly from someone who is your direct counterpart on the sales side, or excuse me, on the CS side, one way that I feel like my team has benefited from working with you is that we're able to segment parts of the customer journey and really focus certain actions on both teams so that we're working effectively towards the same goal, but also keeping both conversations live with the account manager as well as the customer success manager. I'm curious from your perspective, what metrics specifically, shared or otherwise, have helped you drive that partnership with customer success in the customer journey?
Yeah. So there's metrics go two ways, right? To me, data is always very interesting, but without the right story, it's quite useless. So it's like we've all had this experience of buying a disco ball at some point in our life, right? Or a lava lamp, right? And it's lovely and it's glitzy. And when you first have it, it's very beautiful and you look at it. And then it gets put on a shelf and it catches dust. That's what data is without a story behind it, right? You need to have that context and it needs to be relevant. One organization may really care about a certain metric. How many folks are in the system and how often do they log in? Whereas another organization cares about how many folks are using the mobile app and which locations are they using it in, right? So there's a variety and there's a whole library of metrics that you can pull from, but then really understanding from the customer how they define success, what is relevant to them, and then making sure that CS and sales are centering around that, but not just catering to it, because at the end of the day, we're the experts in our own product and in the industry. So being able to then push that forward with the customer and suggest other metrics that may be of value to build out that holistic story. So for me, it's really defining per customer what the relevant metrics are, deciding that that is how we're going forward, and what needles that is actually going to be moving on the customer side. Because at the end of the day, the customer needs to be leading a lot of that conversation.
Santosh, I remember that this was a topic that you're passionate about, segmenting the customer journey. I'm curious to hear your perspective. Oh, you're muted.
The key benefit that we can bring to sales from CS perspective is focus, right? So sales teams are focused on landing new logos as well as existing customer base and everything within that. How do we help sales identify which are the right set of customers which will go really big, right? And that is through data, so we look at from three different dimensions, which is one is platform health, right? How the customer is doing from platform perspective, which is a product set data. We look at the second dimension as organizational enablement, which is around, how many people got trained, how many developers are logging in, how many minutes they're spending on the platform, stuff like that. And then third, we look at executive alignment, right? Where we are engaged within the customer, right? And based on that, we have a derived metrics called expansion readiness, right? And that particular metrics or that score helps sales identify out of our thousands of customers which ones are going to give you your 80% of the add-on ACV revenue this year, right? And what we try to plot it within what I say is a 2x2, which is a customer's readiness to expand on one axis, which is based on the readiness score, and the other axis being a customer's ability to spend, which is a combination of their revenue, like how big they are, as well as their revenue with Salesforce, which are parent company, right? And the sweeter spot is basically the right-hand side corner, where a customer could grow big because a big company has a big Salesforce presence, and we are also getting a lot of success with them based on readiness score, right? And that helps sales focus their efforts on sales efforts on specific customers. That also helps CS focus on which are the customers which potentially be red, but if we can turn them around to green, they'll come to that right-hand side corner segment, right? So that's kind of how we help sales get their alignment and focus around thinking about a subset of customers they can go after.
And Santosh, you mentioned the concept of the adoption axis and then the expansion axis. For CS leaders that are looking to implement something like this as well, what are some KPIs that they should start to consider for either?
Correct. So when I look at especially expansion readiness, I typically look at two dimensions within that: platform health and adoption health, right? Platform health you can pull predominantly for any product that you have. You must have certain KPIs that product has, which can tell, okay, these are implemented correctly, right? And our product has certain such a benchmarks, which from product we can pull the data that how customer has implemented, whether the platform health is core, green or not, and that's core. If the platform isn't functioning correctly, you can't even drive adoption, right? Adoption health for us is number of developers logged in and developers trained. The customers spend time spent on our platform, and then we look at growth of APIs on the platform over a time, right? And those four parameters kind of give us the picture on the adoption health, right? And we have kind of a derived matrix with a formula where we determine between these two where in the spectrum they fall, green, red, and yellow. in an platform, expansion readiness phase, right? So you could, and this I think differs from company to company how you want to define, but predominantly using product data and training, adoption, and some CS input data, you can come out with a derived metrics like that.
Awesome, thank you. Rupal, I know also something that you were passionate about is customer success, having a longer sales cycle. So being directly involved in the sales process, but focused on the longer term relationship, and even driving towards renewal. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts around how you measure against these same adoption and expansion axes.
So I think all of those things are really absolutely relevant, what Santosh said. I like the idea of the framework that they have. What I've done in the past is actually we've put in some predictive analysis around which customers are ready to expand. What are some of those leading indicators that give us some sort of a view into, is this the right time? Is it the right composition? Are these the right variables to look at to ensure that we are going to strategically make a move from an expansion or an upsell perspective, right? Because when I think about it, I almost feel like when we're looking at the customers, the
Oh, looks like we lost Rupal.
Actually, while we're waiting for her, Michelle, would you want to give an introduction?
Yeah, it makes me feel better. I'm not the only one struggling with internet challenges today. So sorry about that. I am in Mexico for an executive offsite for the first time. So we've got some shady internet here. But yes, I am Michelle Weidman. I am the Chief Customer Officer at ONA. So I'm responsible for professional services, customer success, and our technical support teams. And Rupal just joined back on. So you want to finish your sentence?
No, please go ahead, Michelle.
No, I was just doing an intro.
Go on.
No, Rupal, let's finish your idea, because I have a specific question for Michelle around this topic.
So I was just going to finish my thought around the fact that there are obviously indicators that give us an idea of which customers are more likely to expand. And then what we've done historically as well is we've had customer success qualified leads as a team goal that has helped sort of feed into additional opportunities through the sales team. That has essentially built a lot of trust and great partnership between sales and customer success.
Awesome. And that's the perfect segue actually to the topic that I want to bring up. Michelle, I know that Anna, you're playing around with individual versus team quotas. And so when we're driving towards collaboration, how has that actually played out in your organization?
I personally think in organizations that are newer or rapidly growing, the team quotas work a lot better, especially when you're hiring a lot of folks, because you really want your more senior folks to help mentor all the new hires that are coming on board. And I feel like it's more of a teaming effort to hit the overall, goals.
Very nice. And then if we can kind of get into the specifics. So for organizations that may not function similarly in terms of the type of metrics that they measure, but like what behaviors amongst sales and customer success are you trying to drive? I know you mentioned mentoring as one. Are there other behaviors that other organizations should target?
When it comes to working with sales, I mean, it's a couple different things. One, and I apologize if y'all hit on this already, I really do believe that the success team should engage in the pre-sale cycle as early as possible to really be a competitive advantage. So your prospects feel like you are going to partner with them throughout their journey and that you're not just going to sell them something and walk away. Ongoing throughout the life cycle, our customer success directors, which are our most senior, we have a tiering system on our success team. They do strategic account reviews to ensure that we're going deep in the accounts. So they're outlining, what do the org charts look like? Who are the champions? Who are the passes? Who are the detractors? Who on the executive team are we trying to build relationships with? So we're inviting those folks to attend our customer advisory boards or our technical advisory councils. What's the right space in the account to really ensure that sales and success are swimming in the right direction? So we're working, smarter and not harder.
Very nice. Anyone else have anything to add on that general topic? Awesome. All right. So actually, one thing that I want to move towards is, customer success as an organization really helps drive time to value. And we know that when value is attained or realized by the client, there's a higher likelihood that that client is either going to renew faster or expand their contract sooner. How are you guys, and Monty, maybe we'll start with you. How are you focusing specifically on time to value?
Yeah. So again, that is one of those main metrics that we look at, right? We have the TTV, the TTL, and the TTG. So the time to value, time to life, time to value, and time to grow, right? And often these aren't fully linear stages. They do overlap quite a bit. But being able to build out what that customer profile looks like, what kind of use cases, what kind of customer, depending on the industry, how long does it take them to get up and live? Things that I've tracked throughout my career is what we call, churn indicators, right? And you can start seeing these very early on while you're even trying to do the time to live, right? What is the engagement? How many folks show up for the implementation and the trainings? How many executive level folks are engaged and actually are asking those success driving questions? So as you start looking at those metrics and actually breaking it down to those 3 buckets, you can start looking at what you can do to push this time to value. Now, a lot of times what we see is that while the implementation or the training is taking place, which is getting you to that live state, the executives or the business buyers on the account back off because they don't believe that they need to be there. They just want to see what the roll-up and the end product is, right? So making sure that that value conversation is still happening while the TTL is being achieved and shortened, and finding new ways to shorten and partner with CS to shorten that TTL. Then we start doing the value conversations, and you want to make sure that, again, the value language is different. It's different, especially at larger organizations. It's different for the end users as opposed to your executive decision makers, right? What you're talking about are vastly different. To pull on some past history, for example, I used to work in HR tech for a really long time. A recruiter cares about how many candidates they come in, how quickly are these candidates sourced, where have they come in from. But the head of global HR is looking at what is the time to hire, what is the tenure of each of these hires, what is the negative impact of having that empty seat. Those are both value-driven conversations, but they're different value languages. So in getting to that time to value and defining it, understanding what those different value languages are and being able to speak to them is how we partner with CS to be able to drive that constantly forward and then shorten that time to value, because as you mentioned, when you get to value is where you start being able to define that time to grow.
And as someone who has managed a customer success team and is now managing a sales team, what is one behavior that you absolutely ask your AMs to exhibit, or one action or one step that they take during the customer journey that you require them to do in order to hit this KPI?
Learning. So constantly be learning. Learning from your customer, absolutely, like active listening, but learning from your CS counterparts as well. What is your customer doing? I have an allergic reaction to not my jobism, right? Like, that's not my role. That's not my job. Well, it's very quickly, your job is not going to be here if that's your attitude, right? It's constantly learning what your customer is doing and having that active curiosity and teaching, right? If your customer is doing something out of the box or something interesting, make sure that your team members know about it. Make sure your CS person knows about it, and going the other way as well. In my opinion, you can never know too much about your own customer and your own product. And it shouldn't be just your product or the customer. Know your customer's world, because that's how you're going to be able to expand that conversation. And use your CS counterparts. They're often the therapists for your customer. So they have a lot of information that you're going to be able to pull on to have these selling conversations and drive them forward.
Santosh, you unmuted, so I'm assuming this is something that you're excited to talk about. But I'm curious to ask you a more director-pointed question.
Sure.
Are there specific swim lanes that you put into place when you're partnering with your sales team in the way that Mansi just described?
Yeah, I think value realization or time to value. I think the preliminary key to that is the definition of value. What you have really defined as value for the customer, right? And a lot of that work gets done in pre-sales cycle. That's why I think Mansi's point and with Michelle's point, landing well matters so much, because the kind of expectation that we have set as part of pre-sales defines a lot about the kind of value that we can deliver, right? So what we typically do, that's why I think I'm a big proponent like Michelle of involving in the CS in the very, very beginning, around like stage 3 in our sales process, which is you have done a technical win, but you haven't close to actually doing the deal, right? And CS gets involved there for two reasons. One, to Michelle's point, to position CS as actually a strategic differentiator if there is a competition in the place. But the other, to make sure we are landing this customer as close to our ICP, which is we are landing with professional services which or partners, which definitely helps you accelerate the value, or customer is buying training or investing in the architecture or whatever resources they need, which will help you accelerate the value. And what we something do is called collaborative value assessments. We have a value engineering team, and we get involved in the pre-sales to help customer visualize the value they're trying to get out of the platform under two buckets. One is we call business outcomes, the other one is technology outcomes, and both are kind of linked, right? So the way Manshi was defining, the business outcome in a retail context could be, okay, I want to launch my e-commerce site within next 6 months, whatever, for increasing revenue by X percentage, right? The technical outcome could be, I have to implement Salesforce e-commerce and integrate with Oracle or whatever, right? That's the technology use cases. And those are the two things we help define in the pre-sales cycle. And that is exactly what we track as part of post-sales journey, that this is what we jointly agreed in terms of value, and this is how we are tracking in terms of that value in terms of both time as well as are delivering the value, right? Many times we quantify it in the pre-sales as well, that if you do it in this way, potentially you are saving $3 million, and that's probably we work with our value engineering, which is like a consulting team, to define it. And we do something called a value realization, which is retrospective, to go back, actually transparently tell the story that we promised you this is the value you're going to get, this is where you are. It could be good or bad. If it is bad, why? If it is good, great, we delivered on the promise, right? That's how we close the loop. That's why I think a significant chunk of work gets done in pre-sales, and if it's not done, then I think the lifting as part of CS becomes significant post-sales to really get customer to track in terms of value.
And if
Michelle,
I can add just one thing to that, I do think it's really important in a way to operationalize this and get in front of it, is if you don't have a strategic account review process in place, those are mission critical, where you decide what size deal is strategic to your company. You get PSO, success, product engineering, and support in the room, because I think it's mission critical that we ensure that these deals are being set up to succeed from the beginning, which means the right level of support is being sold, the right amount of hours of professional services are going along with it, or the right partner is involved and that partner has experience. So if we know we have a newer partner engaged, we know that we have to give them a little bit more TLC than we would somebody that's done a bajillion implementations for us. But I cheers to everything else Santa said. I just thought the strategic account review was like a pivotal moment for me when I started those at other companies I've been at, and it's an easy thing I think people can do.
Yeah, Rupal?
I think everything's been said. This has been excellent. I love the idea of the value engineering teams, the concept of it. What I do think where there needs to be continued partnership is around where what value continues to mean for the customer, right? Because when they initially buy the product, there is a certain understanding of outcomes, but it's critical to take a step back and ensure that you look at the big picture, look at what the customer is morphing out to be, right? Where is their business headed? I've had over and over, I've seen this, especially with strategic accounts or organizations that are growing. What we initially wired them up for or configured them up for is not necessarily who they are 2 years from now. So that value picture, or that end goal continues to morph. It's a changing frontier. So it's critical for CS and the sales teams to work hand in hand to monitor how is the DNA of the customer changing?
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys. Actually, one thing that I've seen organizations do in almost like forcing the collaboration between sales and CS in driving sales from the CS side is to actually implement a quota on CS qualified leads. So without picking a specific panelist to speak about this, is there anyone who's kind of tried this out, and what are your thoughts on CS qualified leads as a metric for customer success?
I can try and give you an example of how we've done this in the past. I've worked at multiple SaaS organizations, some that have not done it, and more in the recent past, in the last year and a half, where we did implement this. It wasn't a individual goal, because I almost feel like folks would get penalized because you don't know what card you're going to get dealt in your portfolio. It was it was a team goal, right? It was a global team goal that we had to meet a certain number, and we started off small, and then we attached the number of leads, and then we attached a revenue dollar as well with it at what we wanted to achieve, and it worked wonderfully. I think to a certain point where we now were at east versus west, and getting the regions to compete with each other is essentially what was driving some of that. So I absolutely believe there needs to be some level of expansion and growth that needs to be organic and fed from CS, but I don't necessarily know if there is a sweet spot or a number that you can define what it is.
Of course. Santosha, Mansi, I saw you smile at the topic.
Well, because I'm smiling because I've instituted this a few times before, and there are times where it goes swimmingly, and there are times where it's explosively bad, right? Where and very much to Rupal's point, when you start putting individual goals to that, that's where you start seeing that pressure gasket on the CS, on the individual CSMs, getting really, really hard to keep down. And I think the idea should be to drive the correct behavior, right? So we talk a lot about buying personas and getting wider within accounts. And something that we do at Monday that I've always been a big proponent of is doing business reviews. And those business reviews are put together both by the selling org and the adoption org, or the AMs and the CSMs together. You're co-presenting, you are a co-team that helps support this customer on different levels. It helps make it clear to the customer also who to go to for what things, but it also helps create this idea of we are bringing in executives and we're bringing in end users, and we are going to be going through what the value metrics are. To Rupal's point, somebody that signed up a year ago, initiatives have changed, strategies have changed, so you can't just assume it's the exact same metrics. They define value the same way, they define success the same way. Hopefully, you're evolving together. And so making sure that is where you bring in the new folks. And you find that once you've done a couple of business reviews for a company that have gone well and that are relevant, they start proactively wanting to invite other groups in, right? They start wanting to bring their management in. And so this is now a team goal of bringing in qualified leads, right? So as opposed to it being just CS that has to be driving this, just AMs that have to be driving it, because then it starts like, you're great, tell me who you're working next to, I need to know who they are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that we're kind of moving into this realm of what to avoid or what metrics to avoid. For me as a CS leader, when I speak with other leaders, I always want to understand what their experience was like implementing something that seemed to work for larger organizations or broader organizations, but for some reason didn't work out for them. So Michelle or Santosh, I'm curious from your side, what are some metrics that you guys have tried out that maybe you would only recommend organizations that have a certain culture or a certain structure for them to really dive into?
I can go on that. I think especially it refers to the previous conversation, whether you provide individual quota or team quota directly on sales, right? I think that is significantly linked to the culture that you have built from scratch. I mean, if that culture isn't built from the beginning, that the CS explicitly aligned to sales, it becomes very, very difficult to change it midway, that now suddenly we want to be a sales-driven CS culture, and that becomes extremely disruptive to the organizations, right? And then the other aspect that I want to mention is it's never like one size fit all. Especially as you start growing, you would have a set of accounts which you can almost think they're maxed out because they have an enterprise license, right? So for them, you can't have a sales driven CS motion for that, right? Quota driven. So you will start to see a CS motion which is a combination of a quota driven and a non quota driven or MBO driven, because there are some of the largest customers who have invested significantly in your technology might not grow revenue wise, but these are your flagship customers and they require a different set of plays to support it, right? So short answer is you can't have one type of motion, and every time organizations start to think that we can have a uniform motion for across the segment or across the customers, I have seen those backfire in a big way, right? So it has to be based on what customer, what persona, and how you are evolving as an organization. I think our play at 200 million is very different at 1.2 billion, right?
Michelle, you also unmuted. Do you have something on this topic?
I would say the way I've comped my success teams have been pretty similar. It's always been a team-based incremental number, and it starts to get really fun when one success person is hounding another success person about, hey, is that deal going to close? I always think that's exciting to watch. And then the other one's always been on retention. And part of the restrictions on the number of KPIs we've been measuring people on has often been driven by my finance team. And they're like, hey, we don't want too many because I know other people will do ENPS scores or, there's all sorts of different metrics, but I've always kept it more simple and tied to incremental and retention.
Very nice. To completely switch topics, I saw something asked in the chat, and I know, Michelle, this is also a topic that you're passionate about, in aligning metrics from both sales and CS in order to collaborate actually with product and influencing the product roadmap. I'm curious to hear if you've got any advice or actually any questions for the other panelists that you want to discuss.
I think one of the most important things success can do is help product focus and ensure they're not thrashing. And it's been my experience that most engineers don't want to talk to people. So if we can use Product Board or Clubhouse or Jira or whatever it is, and then put a scoring mechanism in place, so you're prioritizing the requests that you submit, it's extremely helpful. The scoring that we use is, number of customers that are having the same request submitted. What's the incremental ACV we could gain if that enhancement request is released? What's the churn that we would lose, if it's not, released? What's the customer sentiment? Is this extremely painful, or is this kind of more of a nice to have? And then the last one is, how often is this enhancement or request being used? Is it something they're going to use every 5 minutes, or is it once a month for some monthly reporting that they need? And then we score and we rank those and we submit that to the product team.
It sounds like your organization is quantifying using sales data and combining that with anecdotal feedback that you're getting from your customers in order to drive the product roadmap. Manze, I'm sorry I cut you off, but it sounded like you had something to share.
Yeah. So at Monday, we have a customer-facing product roadmap that, given that all appropriate paperwork has been signed, they can actually access and see what's on our roadmap. But specifically, and our roadmap obviously evolves often, specifically working with our larger customers, it is very important to make sure that they are getting feedback directly from our product teams, getting feedback directly from our customers, right? We'll often talk to customers and say, well, we want it to do this exact thing in this exact way. And I find that product teams usually are amazing at being able to do industry and market research and come up with ideas and set a direction. But making sure that they consistently have conversations with your largest customers to find out what their operations are. And so setting up those calls so that, CS and AMs are involved, they know what's happening, they're hearing the feedback, but we're not playing a game of telephone. On our larger customers, to Michelle's point, you can't open the floodgates and have product on calls all the time. They would be doing less product and more phone calling. But having those gates for qualifiers where you have customers speak directly to your product team does a couple of things. First of all, it forms your product team and the evolution, and you can truly say we are a customer-centric organization. The other thing it does is it builds that validation and more of that trust relationship at the customer. Now, it may not be your financial buyer, it may not be your end user that is talking to the customer. It may be that you're talking to the PMO org, right? The project management operations org. But the fact that you are investing that amount of time in learning how your customer works and truly trying to evolve and listen is what helps that time to value get even shorter and really entrenches you with going from a vendor to being a partner and building that relationship. So having that direct feedback loop with product and customer is very important.
And because our topic, of course, is leveraging metrics to drive partnership between sales and customer success, Santosha, Rupal, in your experience, does it make sense to assign a specific owner to product, or how has that worked well for either of your organizations?
And I can go. I think linking back to what Mansi was mentioning, having that direct line is important. So what we did is within CS we have CS tech teams, and we created something called product specialists. So within that there are specific people who are product specialists for a particular product line, and they have a direct line to product on one side and they speak to customer on the other side. So you're not necessarily exposing product, which has lower bandwidth, but a team member within CS team who is talking to customers and channeling that back to product, right? And in our case, these major enhancements are owned by those people. It's actually within CS tech team, they own it. And they are understanding from customers based on, of course, some of the same parameters that Michelle mentioned, the largest customers, highest value at stake, both up and down, right? Churn or ACV. But then they are the conduit between customers and the product organization. So we are not necessarily stretching products bandwidth. And CS ends up owning it, and we actually every quarter report it, saying what were the key enhancements that were requested by our customers, how many we delivered, what's in pipeline, working with our product teams.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we've seen some very similar formats as well in past life. What Mansi was touching on earlier was the fact that it's an omni-channel, right? It isn't just one channel from the CSM team. It's also, are you listening to some of the feedback or some of these requests that are coming in from support and or from sales as part of the sales cycle? So making sure there's a listening post along the way to circulate that information back to the product team is critical. So, I've seen it being done multiple ways. One directly within CS, to Santosha's point, the same framework. I've also seen very sophisticated voice of customer programs that are helping define what the product strategy is, right? So not just the product strategy, but also which way the industry is going to trend. So being sort of a what's the word I'm looking for is staying ahead of the curve, right? Even anticipating things that some of the other competitors may not have thought about. So having those guiding posts at different levels that are going to give you different valuable information that will help shape the ultimate roadmap. So I've seen it being done in different ways, but the key is to have those listening posts across the board.
Yep, definitely makes sense. We have time for one more question, and Michelle, I'm going to direct it to you. Someone in the audience asked, how do you metricize customer goals over the course of the customer journey? So can you give examples of how you put into metrics executing against the customer's goals at different phases in the life cycle?
So a lot of this comes, I think, in onboarding, and it kind of summarizes a lot of the points that everybody's been talking about. I mean, you kind of review when you do the onboarding, and this is another question that was presented in the chat, is like, what's the handoff between sales and success? And this is one of my biggest pet peeves, is when you have a BDR qualify a prospect, and then the AE comes in and asks the same thing, and then the SC comes in and asks the same thing, and then PSO comes in and asks the same thing, and you don't want your success person to come in and ask the same thing, because by that point in time, your customer's pulling out your hair going, do you not listen to me? So having an internal onboarding call to collaborate all of that information, put it into the onboarding deck to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, this is why we understanding why you're buying today. And then to Mansi's point about, what is your North Star goal? So we're setting the stage for incremental earlier on in the sales cycle is huge. and then tracking a lot of what everybody talked about. How many users are using the platform or the product? If you sell by capacity, at what point in time should a customer be at 30% usage versus 70% usage versus, we have triggers set at once a customer hits 75%, that's a good point to start upselling them, especially if it's the end of the year and people have leftover money that they might want to get rid of. And then correlating all of that with the external, CSAT and NPS scores that we get as well.
Very cool. Thank you.
And hi, everyone. Thanks so much for that conversation. I think that's all the questions that we have there. So I'll be happy to wrap up at this point. But just wanted to know if you have any final thoughts on the topic.
I often think of CS and whatever the selling org is, whether it's the AE or the AM org, as partners for the customer. There have been many, many conversations. I think there are some questions about this as well, where sometimes the setup does seem to put CS at odds with the selling org, where they feel like there's friction there. And it's one of those things that if it doesn't work well, it's going to negatively impact your customers and your bottom line. And so making sure that those two orgs are in fact collaborating enthusiastically is going to be the base level for anything else to be able to happen, right? Whether you figure out what your metrics are, you figure out what your quotas are, you figure out where the handoff is, that's all the details that are very important. But if you don't have that collaboration and that trust to begin with, you're never going to be able to get to the things that will drive it forward because you haven't even started yet.
That absolutely makes sense. Thank you so much for that. So thank you, Joseph, Mansi, Santosh, Rupal, Michelle. Thank you for joining us, answering questions, going through everything there. I think it was really useful for our audience. So thanks very much, and hopefully see you all again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.